Hey friends, it's Miss Thomasini. You know what? We have more chapters in our book, The Night at Dawn, to read today. It's part of the Magic Treehouse series and it's book number 2. Now, I have to tell you, when I was reading this book, uh, these chapters were getting a little bit scary. Okay, pretty cool. Let me show you some things you might need to know before we start reading. You remember when we were beginning this book, um, Jack and Annie had gone up to the treehouse and found a book about castles, and then Annie made a wish to go to see the castles in the back in the time when there were knights and things like that. Well, um, let me show you a picture of this castle really fast. So here's an example of a castle. This is probably not the exact one from the book, but some cool things about the castle. This is actually a real castle, so things like this really did happen. And you see around the castle right there is what they call a moat. And moats were used to protect people in the castle from enemies who would try to come and um, take over their castle. And so, you know what? Some people actually believed there might even be crocodiles in the moat, but I don't think that was really true. But we don't know. And there was also a bridge. Do you see the bridge? So that's like the only way into the castle is you have to cross the bridge. And um, back in the day, it used to be a drawbridge. So they would lift the bridge up, and that means nobody can come in, or they would lower the bridge down for visitors to come in. Um, some other cool things about the castle. See, I don't know if you can really see, but in the middle right here, um, that part is like open to the air, like it's kind of like a courtyard. And in the castle in the book that we're going to read, they actually have, I think, falcons or hawks that have a nest in there and maybe even a windmill, something like that. Pretty cool. Um, they also have, do you see these kind of like round parts of the castle? They have little windows, and sometimes there would be guards up there to see if there were any um, bad guys coming, and they would alert the people, so they got to look out and see everybody from the outside by standing at the very top of the castle. And you know they also had in this big part some rooms. One of the rooms was like a giant dining hall where they would have large feasts and dinners. They also had a room called the Armory, and I'll show you a picture of that later. The Armory is where they kept all of their gear and their protection, the knights, that metal stuff. I'll show you in a minute about that too. So I think that's all you really need to know about castles for right now. Let's go ahead and get started with our book. Okay, The Night at Dawn, Chapter 3, Across the Bridge. Annie was under the tree looking across the foggy ground. The knight's riding toward that bridge, I think, said Annie. The bridge goes to the castle. Wait, I'll look it up, said Jack. Give me the flashlight. He took the flashlight from her and he pulled the castle book out of his pack. He opened it to the page with the leather bookmark. He read the words under the picture of the knight. This is a knight arriving for a castle feast. Knights wore armor when they traveled long and dangerous distances. The armor was very heavy. A helmet alone could weigh up to 40 pounds. Let me show you this helmet right here. This is an example of what a knight helmet might look like. Think about you. Think about how much you weigh. Some 5-year-olds weigh 40 pounds, and that's as much as a helmet weighs. So imagine if you had a 40-pound helmet on your head. It would be like having a kindergartner on your head wrapped around. That's how heavy it was. Crazy to think about. Pretty exciting though. Wow. Jack had weighed 40 pounds when he was 5 years old. So it'd be like riding a horse with a 5-year-old on your head. Jack pulled out his notebook. He wanted to take notes, as he had done on their dinosaur trip. He wrote, heavy head. What else? He turned the pages of his castle book. He found a picture that showed the whole castle and the buildings around it. The knight's crossing the bridge, said Annie. He's going through the gate. He's gone. Jack studied the bridge in the picture. He read, a drawbridge crossed the moat. The moat was filled with water to help protect the castle from enemies. Some people believed crocodiles were kept in the moat. Jack wrote in his notebook, crocodiles in moat? Question mark. Look, said Annie, peering through the mist. A windmill right over there. Yeah, there's a windmill in here too, said Jack, pointing at the picture. Look at the real one, Jack, said Annie, not the one in the book. A piercing shriek split the air. You know what a shriek is? It's like a loud scream. Yikes, said Annie. It sounded like it came from that little house over there. She pointed through the fog. There's a little house here, said Jack, studying the picture. He turned the page and read, the Hawk House was in the inner ward of the castle. Hawks were trained to hunt other birds and small animals. Jack wrote in his notebook, hawks in a hawk house. Let me show you this picture. It doesn't really have the windmill or the hawk house, but you can kind of tell what's going on. So Jack and Annie are kind of outside the castle, and they see the knights crossing the drawbridge. You know, here's the moat around it. You can't really see it, but the knights are crossing the drawbridge into the inner ward of the castle, or the inner space in the castle. Ooh, kind of cool. We must be in the inner ward. Remember, that's kind of like right in here, said Jack. Listen, said Annie. You hear that? Drums, horns, they're coming from the castle. Let's go see. Wait, said Jack. He turned more pages of the book. I want to see what's really going on. Jack, not what's in the book, said Annie. But look at this. He pointed to a picture of a big party. Men were standing by the door, playing drums and horns. He read, fanfares were played to announce different dishes in a feast. Feasts were held in the great hall. So they were hearing something that looked like this. This is what they call fanfare. So the trumpets and other instruments would play, and somebody would announce really loudly what was on the menu for the feast. And this is what they said. You can look at the book, but I'm going to the real feast, said Annie. Wait, said Jack, studying the picture. It showed boys his age carrying trays of food, whole pigs, pies, peacocks with all their feathers. Peacocks? Jack wrote. They eat peacocks? Question mark. He held up the book to show Annie. Look, I think they eat. Where was she going? She's gone again. Jack looked through the fog. He heard the real drums and the real horns. He saw the real hawk house, the real windmill, and the real moat. He saw Annie dashing across the real drawbridge. Then she vanished through the gate leading into the castle. Chapter 4. Into the castle. Listen to what Jack says. I'm going to kill her, muttered Jack. He threw his stuff into his pack and moved toward the drawbridge. He hoped no one would see him. It was getting darker. It must be night. When he got to the bridge, he started across. The wooden planks creaked under his feet. He peered over the edge of the bridge. Were there any crocodiles in the moat? He couldn't tell. Halt! Someone shouted. What do you think halt means? Halt! I think it means stop. Let's see. A guard on top of the castle wall was looking down. Jack dashed across the bridge. He ran through the castle gate and into the courtyard. From inside the castle came the sounds of music, shouting, and laughter. Jack hurried to a dark corner and crouched down. He shivered as he looked around for Annie. Torches lit the high wall around the empty courtyard. Because they didn't have lights back then. They had to use torches, which was like fire on a stick to see things. The courtyard was nearly empty. Two boys led horses that clopped over the gray cobblestones. Eee! Jack turned. It was the knight's black horse. Psst. He peered into the darkness. There was Annie. She was hiding behind a well in the center of the courtyard. She waved at him. Jack waved back. He waited till the boys and the horses disappeared inside the stable. Then he dashed to the well. I'm going to find the music, whispered Annie. Are you coming? Okay, Jack said with a sigh. They tiptoed together across the cobblestones. Then they slipped into the entrance of the castle. Noise and music came from a bright room in front of them. They stood on one side of the doorway and peeked in. The feast in the great hall, whispered Jack. He held his breath and stared in awe. Look at this. This is what a great hall could look like. Long rows of dining tables, and down here is where they would have had a fire in a big giant fireplace. And they have lots of food. Well, they didn't have these chandeliers. As you heard Jack say, they had torches everywhere. But they just put chandeliers in here now so people can look at the castle. But yeah, lots of food, carpets hanging on the wall. Interesting. So this is what a dining hall could look like with a great feast of dinner. A giant fireplace blazed at one end of the noisy room. Antlers and rugs hung on the stone walls. Flowers covered the floor. Boys in short dresses carried huge trays of food. Dogs were fighting over bones under the table. People in bright clothes and funny hats strolled among the crowd. Some played funny shaped guitars. Some tossed balls in the air. Some balanced swords on their hands. Men and women dressed in capes and furs. They sat at a long, crowded wooden table. I wonder which one is the knight, said Jack. I don't know, whispered Annie, but they're eating with their fingers. Suddenly, someone shouted behind them. Jack whirled around. A man carrying a tray of pies was standing a few feet away. See, they're peeking into the dining hall. They're seeing all these activities going on. The dog with the bone. See, the boys kind of have the short dresses. They dress differently now than they did back then. This guy's throwing balls up in the air. I think we're going to call that juggling. Fancy dressed people back here. And oh, this guy's starting to yell at them. I bet they're in his way. You know, back then they even talked a little bit different. They talked fancy. Listen to what he says. Who art thou? He asked angrily. Jack, squeaked Jack. Annie, squeaked Annie. Then they ran as fast as they could down a dimly lit hallway. Chapter 5, Trapped. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. This looks like knights in shining armor. Where are their heads? Come on, cried Annie. Jack raced behind her. Were they being followed? Here, quick! Annie dashed toward a door off the hallway. She pushed the door open. Two of them stumbled into a dark, cold room. The door creaked shut behind them. Give me the flashlight, said Annie. Jack handed it to her and she switched it on. Yikes! A row of knights right in front of them. Annie flicked off the light. Silence. They aren't moving, Jack whispered. Annie turned the light back on. Show you this picture. They're just suits, Jack said. Without heads, said Annie. Let me have the flashlight a second, said Jack, so I can look in the book. Annie handed him the flashlight. He pulled out the castle book. He flipped through the pages until he found what he was looking for. Jack put the book away. It's called the Armory, he said. It's where the armor and weapons are stored. He shined the flashlight around the room. Oh, man, whispered Jack. The light fell on shiny chest plates, leg plates, arm plates. On shelves filled with helmets and weapons. On shields, spears, swords, crossbows, clubs, battle axes. There was a noise in the hall. Voices. Let's hide, said Annie. Wait, said Jack. I gotta check on something first. Hurry, said Annie. It'll just take a second, said Jack. Hold this. He handed Annie the flashlight. He tried to lift a helmet from a shelf. It was too heavy. He bent over and dragged the helmet over his head. The visor slammed shut. Oh, forget it. It was worse than having a 5-year-old on your head. More like having a 10-year-old on your head. Not only could Jack not lift his head, he couldn't see anything either. Jack! Annie's voice sounded far away. The voices! They're getting closer! Look, there's Jack with the helmet on his head. Turn off the flashlight! Jack's voice echoed inside the metal chamber. He struggled to get the helmet off. Suddenly, he lost his balance and went crashing into the other pieces of armor. The metal plates and weapons clattered to the floor. Jack lay on the floor in the dark. He tried to get up, but his head was too heavy. He heard deep voices. Someone grabbed him by the arm. The next thing he knew, his helmet was yanked off. He was staring into the blazing light of a fiery torch. Oh, chapter 6. We'll have to read that one tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in, friends. I'll see you later.